I overheard my wife whisper, "Send the hit team tomorrow." At first, I thought I misheard, but then I remembered. She never knew I used to be a sniper. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and please do not forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing this with someone who needs to hear it. I had just wrapped up a late-night client meeting in my home office, still in my work shirt, loosening my tie, when I heard her voice drift down the hallway from our bedroom. At first, I thought she was talking to her sister, or maybe her boss. She always had late-night calls. But this time, it was different. Her voice was low, like she didn't want anyone hearing. So I paused. Quietly, I shifted behind the door frame and waited, the hallway light barely illuminating the slightly ajar bedroom. "Send the hit team tomorrow. Make it clean. He won't be a problem by the weekend." I stood there frozen. For a split second, my brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was watching a show? Practicing lines for a play? But no, she wasn't an actress, and the voice I heard wasn't fictional. It was hers, calm, composed, deadly serious. And that's when it hit me. She didn't know I used to be a sniper. She didn't know I could read a voice like a topographic map, pick apart the layers, identify fear, confidence, guilt. What I heard wasn't pretend. It was a plan, and it was about me. I backed up like I'd touched fire. Slowly, I knocked over my water bottle on the console table, just loud enough. Her voice stopped immediately. The bedroom door clicked closed. A second later, she opened it like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just sentenced me to death. "Need help, babe?" I swallowed hard and smiled. "Nah, just dropped something. All good." She came over, kissed me on the cheek, and walked off like she hadn't just chilled my blood. That kiss, it felt colder than the barrel of my old rifle. That night, I lay in bed beside her, her head resting on my chest like it had for the past 6 years. And I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Every beat of my heart felt like a countdown. I stared at the ceiling, and every minute dragged by like a ghost whispering in my ear. I thought about all the times she made me laugh. The surprise anniversary getaway to the cabin in the woods. The time she stayed up for 2 nights nursing me through one of my worst PTSD relapses. The mornings she made my coffee just the way I liked it. 2 sugars, no cream. And now, I couldn't stop wondering, was all of it fake? Had she always been playing me? I remember once, a friend of mine from my old unit told me, "You can train for war, but you can't train for betrayal." That hits different. I never really got it, until that night. I stared at her face in the dark, bathed in the moonlight coming through the window, and I tried to read her expression. Was she sleeping peacefully, or waiting for me to drop my guard? That line kept looping in my head like a broken radio. "Send the hit team tomorrow." Why tomorrow? Why a team? Who else was in on this? And then the most terrifying question of all struck me. How long has she been planning this? I wasn't just scared. I was hurt. Broken. I started replaying every moment of our relationship in my head, looking for clues, for cracks I'd missed. My training taught me to look for threats, but I'd never thought I'd need to scan my own. And I knew in that moment, I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I had to play along, smile like a fool, sleep next to her like nothing had changed. I knew how to kill. I knew how to survive. But I didn't know how to unlove someone who looked you in the eyes while plotting your death. So please stay with me. What happened next changed everything. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what you do when love turns into the most dangerous weapon of all. It's hard to describe the feeling of waking up next to someone who might be plotting your death. I watched her stretch that morning, hair a mess, yawning, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She looked like everything I used to believe in. And yet every smile, every touch, it all felt calculated now. As if I was living with a stranger wearing my wife's skin. We met 7 years ago in a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday. I had just left active duty. I was raw, numb from war, lost in civilian life. She bumped into me, spilled my drink, and then bought me another one before I could even speak. I remember thinking, that's the kind of person who deserves protection. She asked what I did, and I told her I worked in security. She never pushed. I figured that was respect. Now I think it was strategy. We fell fast. Too fast, maybe. Within a year, we were married. She wanted the beach wedding. I didn't care. I would have married her in a bunker. She cried when I gave her my dog tags as part of my vows. She said she'd never felt safer with anyone. I believed her. Looking back, there were red flags, but they were wrapped in moments that felt too pure to question. Her phone always face down. Random late night, work emergencies. A strange hesitation whenever I mentioned old military buddies. She had this way of changing the subject so gently I never noticed. Her instincts were masterful, never defensive, just redirecting. I told her things I never told anyone. About the mission in Mosul. About the kid I couldn't save. About the nightmares that made me wake up gasping for air. She'd hold me and say, "You're home now. You're safe." God, I wanted that to be true. I wanted to believe I was finally safe. That morning, after I overheard her call, she made me pancakes, my favorite. Blueberry, extra syrup. She sat across from me at the table, humming to herself like nothing was wrong. Her phone buzzed. She flipped it face down again. "Who's that?" I asked casually. "Work. The campaign's heating up." "Right. The mayoral campaign she was managing." That's what she told me. She was always networking, always on the phone. I used to think she was just ambitious. Now I was wondering if politics was just her cover. As I ate, she reached across and wiped syrup from my lip. That single gesture, so intimate, so familiar, felt like a knife turning in my chest. How could someone be so soft while hiding something so brutal? Later that afternoon, I pretended to take a nap, but instead watched her from the hallway camera I'd installed during my private security days. She was in the study, pacing, talking on her second phone, the one she thought I didn't know about. Her voice was lower than before, harder to hear, but her posture said everything. She wasn't nervous. She was in control. That was the moment I stopped doubting. Whatever this was, she wasn't being forced. She wasn't in danger. She was running the operation. I went back through our old photo albums that night. Our trip to Maine, our anniversary in San Diego, her birthday in Paris. And with every smile I saw in those pictures, I wondered, was she already planning it back then? Did she pick me because I was a ghost? A man trained to disappear? Or did she fall in love and then change? And here's the part that really broke me. If you had asked me one day before that phone call who I trusted most in this world, I would have said her. Without hesitation. I would have laid down my life for her. Hell, I thought I already had, emotionally, mentally. Now I was trying to figure out if she'd always been this person, or if something changed. Something I caused. Maybe I shared too much. Maybe I made her afraid. Or maybe I was just a means to an end all along. The woman I thought I knew would have died to protect me. But the woman in my house was planning to make me disappear. And I didn't know which one was real anymore. I needed proof. Maybe it was my training, or maybe it was the part of me that still hoped this was all some colossal misunderstanding. But deep down, I already knew. I just couldn't accept it yet. So I set a trap. I waited until she left for her afternoon run. The same route, the same playlist, like clockwork. As soon as she turned the corner down the block, I went into the bedroom, pulled out the shoebox I kept behind the closet wall, and retrieved my old surveillance gear. Micro-listening device. Motion-activated recorder. Secure cloud upload. I tucked one mic into the underside of her nightstand drawer, another behind the light switch plate in her office, and finally one in the living room vase she always kept near the window. Then I waited. That night, I acted normal. We watched our usual crime series. Ironic, I know. She rested her head on my chest and laughed at the detective's punchlines, all while I stared at the screen, barely breathing. The next morning, I downloaded the recordings to my laptop. The file from the bedroom was quiet, just drawer noise, clothes rustling, ambient hums. The office file, though, that one hit like a sniper round. He's still here. Yes, he suspects something, I can tell. No, he doesn't know about the Phoenix file. If he finds that, we're done. Phoenix file? She paused for a long time. I can't stall much longer. If this drags out, we lose funding. The board won't wait. Make sure it's handled. My stomach dropped. This wasn't about a personal vendetta anymore. This was organized. Funded. Monitored. There was a board involved. What kind of campaign was she running? That was when I realized she wasn't just trying to get rid of me. She was part of something bigger, something with layers, players, and a chain of command. I spent the next few hours replaying the audio over and over, cataloging every phrase, every code word. I knew how to break intel. I'd done it for years overseas. But doing it from inside your own home? That's a different kind of hell. Later, I listened to the recording from the living room. This one was quiet, until a voice I didn't recognize came through. A man. Calm. Precise. He's former Special Forces. Don't underestimate him. If he smells blood, he won't stop until everyone is buried. Her voice followed. That's why we need to move now. He's already watching me. He just doesn't know I'm watching back. I felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. She knew. She knew I was onto her. And she was still playing the game, better than I was. My hands trembled. Not from fear, but from rage. From grief. From the realization that this wasn't just betrayal. It was war. I opened a locked USB drive I hadn't touched in years. It contained encrypted data from my military years, contacts, safe houses, a few classified files I was never supposed to keep. But desperate men don't follow protocol. I searched for anything tied to Phoenix. To my surprise, something pinged. Operation Phoenix, a black-budget project terminated a decade ago. Unauthorized assassinations. Political influence. State-sponsored rogue factions. The last intel said it was dismantled, scrapped for being too dangerous, too untraceable. But now it had a heartbeat again. And my wife, my beautiful, compassionate, brilliant wife, was its heart. I stared at her photo on my desk. The same smile I fell in love with. But now, behind it, I saw the machinery. The calculations. The mission. I thought I knew pain. I thought I knew what it meant to lose people. But nothing prepares you for losing someone while they're still alive. Still lying next to you in bed. Still calling you love while planning your execution. I didn't sleep that night. I lay
always
there,
thought
eyes
I was
open,
the secret
heart
keeper
pacing,
in this
while she
marriage.
curled into me like
After
she always
all,
did.
I had done
wondered
things
if
I
she
could
could
never
feel
put
the
into
difference.
words.
If she could
Missions
hear the
that
way
never
my breath
existed.
had changed.
Files that were
I knew she
scrubbed
was
from
lying.
every known system.
And now I was done
I had
pretending.
scars
from bullets no doctor could trace. But it turns out she was the better liar. The night after I heard her on the recordings, I waited until she was asleep, then crept to her closet. I wasn't sure what I was even looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Behind the shoe boxes and travel bags, I found a gray case I didn't recognize. Sleek. Cold. Locked with a fingerprint reader. I knew better than to break into it immediately. Instead, I carefully lifted one of her used coffee mugs from the sink the next morning and pressed her fingerprint against the pad. It clicked open. Inside was a second phone, a black notebook, and a single photo of me, standing in the backyard, watering the plants. Someone had taken it from a long distance. I felt my chest cave in. The notebook was filled with numbers, coded words, and addresses. I knew field cipher when I saw one. She was logging something, movements, times, call signs. But the most chilling detail was on the phone. Once I figured out her passcode, my birthday, of all things, I found folders labeled with initials, D or J. One folder was titled simply, Asset Alpha. That was me. Inside were time-stamped photos. My routines. My text threads. Notes on my behavior, even down to when I took painkillers for my old knee injury. She'd been tracking me like a target. Like I was her mission. My mouth went dry as I read one message from a contact saved as D. He's not showing signs of resistance. Still unaware. Her reply, not for long. Everything's moving forward. I'm just buying time. D. Why did that letter haunt me? I scanned the photo metadata. One had GPS coordinates. I dropped them into a map app. It wasn't far, just on the outskirts of town, near a burned-down warehouse. Suddenly, I remembered something. David. Her brother. Years ago, I told her about a mission that went bad. A raid gone wrong. A black site misidentified targets. One casualty was a young man named David, an intelligence asset that wasn't supposed to be there. The file was buried, sealed, forgotten. She cried when I told her. Said it was a tragedy. Said she didn't blame me. She never told me her brother's name. Now I knew. David was her brother. And I was the man responsible for his death. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking. The woman I loved had every reason in the world to want me gone. And I had handed her every tool to do it. My instincts were screaming, but my heart was drowning. What was real? The woman who held me after nightmares? Or the one who documented every one of my weaknesses? I thought of every I love you. Every moment we sat by the fire, hands intertwined. The night she whispered, I'll always protect you. Was that before or after she became my handler? I closed the notebook and stared at the dark screen of the second phone. My reflection stared back, someone older, someone cracked. Someone who didn't know the woman he married. There's something they don't tell you about memory. The worst parts don't fade, they wait. They wait in the cracks of your silence. In the scent of burning metal. In the sound of a radio crackling with static. And when they come back, they don't knock. They kick the door down. That night, after discovering her brother was David, the same David from that mission, everything came rushing back. It was a Black Ops assignment, the kind that doesn't make it into official logs. A safe house harboring insurgent financiers in northern Jordan. Satellite intel was clear. Our team was locked in, ready, precise. But when we entered, it wasn't just enemies inside. There was a kid, maybe 24. Civilian clothes, unarmed, terrified. He had his hands up. I remember that. So clearly. And I remember yelling, hold fire. But someone, one of ours, didn't listen. One shot. That's all it took. Center mass. David. I only learned his name later. The brass swept it under the rug, told us he was collateral damage. Wrong place, wrong time. But I remembered his face. His eyes. The blood. I carried that guilt in silence. I never knew who he was to her. I never connected the name. She'd shown me photos of a brother once, but the face was different, older, smiling, alive. I had no reason to match the two. Until now. Suddenly, all the pieces made sense. How she found me. Why she never pushed about my past. Why she waited to strike. She had to build the perfect story. Let the guilt grow roots inside me. Make sure I trusted her completely before turning the blade. And she succeeded. I stood in my study that night, staring out the window, and I remembered something else, David's last words. He tried to speak, blood pouring from his chest. I knelt beside him, pressed my hands over the wound, whispering, "Stay with me." But he just looked up, eyes wide, and mouthed a name. At the time, I thought it was nonsense. Maybe delirium. Now I know. He said her name. He died thinking of his sister. And I was the man who let him die. My hands gripped the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white. The guilt that I'd buried under missions and medals surged through me like a flood. I pulled out the old journal I kept from my time overseas. I flipped to the page from that mission, scribbled with radio times, names, commands. And there it was, right in the corner, written in a moment of pain I barely remembered. Civilian. One casualty. Initials DM. David Monroe. Her last name before she married me. She must have searched through classified networks, hunted down every file, every report. She must have known what I did before she ever said hello in that coffee shop. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was ritual. A slow, personal execution disguised as love. But then another thought crept in, one I didn't want to admit. What if part of her did fall in love with me? What if that was the tragedy? That she came to destroy me, and then didn't know how to stop? Because for all her planning, she hadn't killed me yet. And she could have. She had the means, the people, the time. Instead, she waited. Watched. Maybe she was torn in two, just like I was. Maybe the only thing more dangerous than her hate was her confusion. And maybe the only thing more dangerous than my guilt was what I'd do with it. I wasn't going to wait around for a bullet in the back. If she was going to end me, she'd have to earn it. That morning, she told me she was meeting a campaign donor for dinner, some political guy she'd mentioned before. I nodded, smiled, kissed her on the cheek. "Be safe," I said. She winked and replied, "Always." She left at 6:03 p.m. By 6:10, I was gone too, but not out of town. I doubled back using a dirt trail behind our property, parked in a garage I'd rented under a fake name weeks ago for emergencies, and set up shop. I'd packed a duffel bag with essentials: encrypted radio, thermal scope, suppressed sidearm, burner phone, cash, a small drone. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was survival. I launched the drone first. Quiet, nearly invisible. It hovered 3 blocks from the house, high enough to avoid attention, close enough to catch every angle. I watched the feed on my tablet, heart pounding like a war drum. At exactly 7 p.m., a black SUV pulled up. Tinted windows. No plates. 3 men got out, tall, broad, dressed like private security, but moved like former military. They weren't delivery guys. They weren't friends. And they didn't knock. They went around the back, just like I used to. One had a crowbar. Another, a duffel of tools. The third? He carried nothing. That one worried me. I magnified the drone's lens and got a better look. His eyes scanned everything. Every tree. Every shadow. He wasn't just part of the team. He was leading it. I recognized that look. It was the same one I used to wear. These weren't amateurs. This was a hit team. And she had sent them. I switched to thermal. No sign of her in the house. She was really gone, or maybe just not stupid enough to be there when it happened. I watched as the team entered the back door. Silent, clean, professional. 2 moved upstairs. 1 remained in the kitchen, monitoring entry points. I activated the emergency override on the security system I'd built before we ever got married. Cameras on. Mic recording. Door sensors pinging back data to my tablet in real time. This house was still my battlefield. I tapped into the living room speaker. "Smile for the cameras, boy." The one in the kitchen froze. He looked up. The others came rushing down. I switched the lights off remotely, then activated the strobes in the hallway, disorienting, flashing in erratic pattern. The house was now a trap. I sprinted across the side lawn and slipped through a crawl space I'd built during renovations. I emerged in the basement silent. Years of combat taught me one thing above all: don't meet force with force, meet it with misdirection. They had the numbers, but I had the house. One of them entered the basement with a flashlight. His footsteps were heavy. Rushed. That was his first mistake. I moved behind him in the dark and knocked him out cold. His comm buzzed. "Echo 2, you good?" Silence. "Echo 2? I picked up the radio. Pressed the button. Whispered, "He's sleeping." Then I cut the power to the entire grid. The house dropped into darkness. They didn't know where I was, but I knew exactly where they were. The house was dark, silent, but not still. I moved through it like smoke, floorboard by floorboard, memory guiding every step. I knew where the creaks were, where the light would catch under the doors, where fear would settle in the hearts of men hunting in unfamiliar ground. They had numbers. I had knowledge. And then came the click of heels at the front door. She was back. I watched through the peephole from the shadows of the foyer as she stepped inside, phone in hand, calm as ever. Her voice was composed low. He's still inside. It's not done yet. So she knew. She always knew. She walked into the kitchen and froze when she saw the drawer open. One of her men was gone. The others weren't responding. Her eyes scanned the room, the open back door, the faint breeze rustling the curtain. And then, for the first time, I saw fear. Not panic. Not guilt. Just realization. That I was no longer playing along. She turned slowly, and I was already there, gun raised, not trembling. Her mouth opened. You don't want to do this. Neither did you, I said. She looked at me, not like a wife looks at a husband, but like a handler looks at a target. She wasn't crying. Her breathing was steady. It was supposed to be clean, she whispered. No suffering, no blood. I almost laughed. You're telling me this is mercy? No, she said. This was closure. And then she said his name. David, her brother. The man I'd watched die. The man whose death had built the wall between us, brick by silent brick. I didn't plan to fall for you, she said. But I did. And I hated you for it. You took him from me, and then you made me love you. Her voice cracked, not from weakness, but from restraint. I lowered the gun. Just an inch. Then why now? I asked. Why not years ago? Because you were broken then. And killing a broken man isn't justice. It's pity. I wanted you to feel safe, whole, human. And then I wanted to take that away, like you did to him. I stood there, breathless. This wasn't just about vengeance. It was about balance. About making me carry the same weight she did. You think I don't carry it already? I said. I remember his eyes. I remember his last breath. I remember every second. She blinked. And for just a moment she softened. I know, she whispered. That's why I didn't stop loving you. I closed the distance between us, slow, unsure. She didn't move, didn't run, just looked at me. Two people shaped by violence, scarred by love, doomed by truth. Then the back door crashed open. One of the operatives staggered in, bleeding, gun raised. Reflex took over. I shielded her without thinking, drew my weapon, and fired twice. Clean, precise, center mass. He dropped. Silence returned. She looked at me like she didn't know who I was anymore. Neither did I. He was dead. Right there in our kitchen. The one she sent. And I was still alive. Because of instinct. Because of muscle memory. Because I acted before I thought. But now, I didn't know what that made me. A survivor? Or a fool? She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood there, frozen, hands limp at her sides, her lips barely moving as she whispered, "You need to hear something." Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. She walked to the hallway, opened the bottom drawer of the desk we never used, and returned with a small black case. She didn't say a word as she handed it to me. Inside was a journal, thin, weathered, pages filled with handwriting I recognized instantly. Hers. Neat, clean, careful, too careful. On the first page, written in blue ink, were the words, "If I couldn't tell you the truth, maybe I could write it." I turned the pages slowly. She wrote about her brother, how he raised her after their parents died, how he joined intelligence not for glory, but because he believed he could stop things before they ever started. She described him as stubborn, brilliant, and always humming the same melody when he cooked eggs. Then came the part one couldn't stop reading. She found out about the raid, not from the news, but from whispers. Documents hidden deep inside a backchannel network. Her brother, David, wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't even assigned to that safe house. He'd been pulled into an unauthorized meet. She didn't blame me at first. Not until she found a redacted report with my ID code next to the final command entry. That's when she began tracking me. She saw me one day, alone post-service, staring blankly into a coffee cup. She never planned to speak to me. But then she said she saw something in my eyes. Not guilt. Not violence. Silence. The kind that only comes after you've buried someone you can't forget. She followed me for weeks. Learned my habits. Found out about my security consulting work. Found out where I lived. Who I spoke to. What I read. What I feared. She wrote, "I thought I would hate him. But the truth was, I pitied him." That pity turned into questions. Those questions turned into coffee. Coffee turned into conversation. And conversation turned into everything else. She admitted she had tried to pull away. Tried to remember her mission. Remember David. Remember what she was supposed to do. But every time I smiled, or held her hand, or told her something I'd never told anyone, the lines blurred more. She kept the journal hidden. She wrote in it only when I was away. And now, on the final page, written shakily and smeared by what might have been tears, was this. "I didn't fall in love with a killer. I fell in love with a man who tried to live with what he did. I wanted justice for David, but I never wanted it to destroy the only good thing I found after he was gone. And now, I don't know who I am anymore. I sat with that for a long time. She never came into the room. She gave me space, not because she was scared, but because she knew there was nothing left to say. Hours passed. Maybe more. I don't remember. Eventually, I found her sitting on the steps outside. Her knees were drawn to her chest, her hair falling into her face, her eyes distant but dry. She didn't look at me when I sat beside her. She just said, "I loved him. I loved you." And I couldn't carry both. I didn't speak. I didn't touch her. I just sat there with her. In the quiet. In the ruins. In the space between what we were and what we could never be again. The house was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes with peace, but the kind that arrives when there's nothing left to say. The body had been removed. No sirens. No police. No reports. We didn't call anyone. We didn't have to. She made one call to a contact I didn't recognize, and within an hour, the mess was gone. Just like that. Like it never happened. She didn't look at me for the rest of that day. I didn't look at her either, but we were always in the same room, breathing the same air, drowning in the same silence. The next morning, she was gone. No note. No goodbye. Just her side of the closet, empty. Her toothbrush gone. The photos from the hallway walls removed. Only the nail holes left behind, like scars. I didn't try to follow her. Part of me knew I never really had her to begin with. And part of me still didn't know if I would pull the trigger if I ever saw her again, or fall into her arms. In the days that followed, I packed up what was left of my life. I kept the journal. I burned the rest. I moved into a small place up north, near the edge of a forest. Somewhere no one asked questions. Somewhere no one knew my name. I started walking again. At dawn. At dusk. Sometimes through the rain. Sometimes barefoot. Just to feel something real beneath me. One afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a single sentence. David forgave you. I hope someday I can too. There was no signature, but I knew it was her. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. Not because I missed her. Not because I hated her. But because I finally understood what we had really been. Two people shaped by war, clinging to love like it could save us. And maybe for a moment it did. The forest was quiet, just the wind in the pines and the gravel crunching under my boots. I had followed the trail for months. Not a physical one, but a digital shadow left by the men behind her. The ones who gave the orders, who turned grief into a weapon, who watched from a distance and pulled strings like they were playing a game. She was gone. I hadn't seen her since that letter, but she'd told me enough. They gave me names, locations, contacts. If you ever needed to finish what I couldn't, I took that as permission. The final name on the list was a man called Calder, an old name from the Phoenix archives, a strategist, a cleaner, someone who vanished after every mission with his hands bloodless but soaked in responsibility. And now, I was standing 200 yards away from him. He was in a glass cabin by a frozen lake, peaceful, alone. A man who'd made a fortune off black ops and death, now sipping scotch like nothing ever touched him. I took a breath and lifted the rifle, the same one I swore I'd never use again. The scope settled on his chest. I could see the rise and fall, the pulse in his throat. He had no idea I was there. I waited, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to remember. I thought of her. The first time she smiled at me, the way she looked that night in the kitchen, the trembling in her voice when she said she hated me for making her love me. And then I thought of David, the boy in that safe house, the brother she buried twice, once in life, and again in pursuit of revenge. My finger tightened. This wasn't about rage anymore, or guilt, or even justice. It was about letting something end. So I took the shot. Clean. Fast. No noise but the whisper of the wind. He dropped like a stone. I stayed there a while, watching, not out of caution, but respect, because whether he deserved it or not, I needed to feel something when it was over. As I walked away, I didn't feel like a hero. I didn't feel like a man redeemed. I just felt tired. Tired of carrying ghosts. Tired of pretending that some sins could be erased. I left a letter on the cabin steps, unsigned. Inside, I wrote only this. Not all wounds bleed. Some just stay open. This one is for David, and for the woman who made me remember what it felt like to love, and to be hunted by it. I never went back. But sometimes, when the wind is quiet and the trees hold their breath, I swear I hear her voice. And I wonder, if she's somewhere out there, finally forgiving herself. Did I make the right choice, or just add to the pain? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I need to know. And if this story hit you, like, subscribe and turn on the bell. More truths are coming.